Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with some more Christmas cards for this year's holiday card series, as well as for this week's, still in the same week. It's been a long week. Anyway, this week's color throwdown challenge, which I would, in a sense, threw me for a loop, but more so because I think I had too many ideas going on. I don't even have the footage to share of the mistakes. I knocked over an entire container of sticky embossing powder all over myself and my work. Like, it was just one of those days. But in the end, I got a couple cards out of it and I had a lot of fun making them. So I'm using the Joy to You and Yours stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. This is the stamp set that comes in the December 2022 card kit, which I've already done a video on. I did an unboxing and made some cards. I will link to that at the end of this video. And the stamp set is also available individually. So I will have links to everything down below. I will also have a link to the color throwdown challenge because there'll be a bunch of inspiration. Anyone can play along, all of that. That will be in my blog post, linked below the video. So I said it in the unboxing video. I love this stamp set. And it's funny because it's one that I'd probably been like it's nice. And I don't know if I would have ordered it, which I can say that now. And I'm like, of course I would have ordered it. I order everything. But anyway, I love this. I love this set. I love it so much. These like sentiments with their fancy little frames. Chef's kiss. So I took black cardstock and I stamped the Joy sentiment onto it with clear embossing ink. I'd used my anti-static powder tool. And then I heat embossed it with copper embossing powder. And then once it was like cooled off for a few seconds, I wiped off that embossing powder just with a microfiber cloth. There is a coordinating wafer die set for this stamp set that doesn't come in the kit. It's a separate purchase. I don't have the die set, so I just fussy cut it, which with this, not difficult. If I had the dies, I would have used the dies because I always prefer the wafer dies. But you make do. So I just fussy cut this. You could also, if you have like rectangle wafer dies, one that's, close in size, those sorts of things, you could do that as well. But again, this is simple enough to fussy cut. So I fussy cut both of these with my little detail cutting scissors. And then off camera, I had embossed some panels of white cardstock using the Fir Tree Branches embossing folder. That embossing folder also does come in the kit, is also available separately. So I embossed the white cardstock with the embossing folder. I've shown that in a ton of videos, how I use Simon's embossing folders in my Spellbinders Platinum 6. I have the platform base, the embossing folder, and I have 2 metal shims and embosses perfectly. So with this color throwdown challenge, one of the colors was sage green. And I do not have a sage green paint, or at least not the color I wanted. So I just started mucking around and custom blended my own little color combo, which for me doesn't faze me. I know for some people it's overwhelming, or when it comes to color theory and all that sort of thing, I get it. I've been doing this for years. I used to do this. Kind of brought me back to back in the days when I used to own a salon and do like nails for a living, and I was an esthetician and all that stuff. I used to custom mix I had an entire system. Like I had custom mixing tiles and palettes and all kinds of things because I could make any color. Anyway, I mucked around and swirled up a color that I was happy with. And I used 4 different colors of distress paints for this. I used cracked pistachio and a little bit of forest moss, some rustic wilderness, and some picket fence. Because my whole plan was to just add a bit of dry brush detail to these embossed backgrounds. And I wanted it to be this sort of sage green color. I didn't get it quite to the sage green, but I really liked how this color was turning out. So I was like, I'm just going to stick with it. So I could have added more white, made it more sage, but I can, whatever works. So now I'm just using the actual brush. It's a dry brush and I'm kind of tapping off the excess. So there's not a lot of paint on here. And then I'm just brushing it onto these backgrounds that I have embossed with that Fir Tree Branches embossing folder. And the beauty of it is because it's been dry embossed is the paint will catch certain areas and leave others, which just kind of enhances the, the texture and all that kind of fun stuff. And again, this was just fun. I was mucking around. I got paint all over the place. I'm working on my glass media mat. So when I'm done all this, it just wipes off the media mat. The only thing you need to remember is like things like your brushes, wash them immediately afterwards, because distress paint does dry permanently. You will ruin your brush if you let the paint just solidify. So originally I was just going to do this bit of dry brushing, but I had, a fair bit of paint left over. So I'm like, well, I can get, paint another piece of cardstock and use that for my die cutting. So, got some colors. So I took a piece of KRAFT HEAVYSTOCK and I just painted it with the remainder of the paint. And this was just dumb luck. I had just enough. Just enough to cover this piece with, for enough space to die cut my little fir tree branches, which I'll get to in a second. So I literally had to like scrape off the last little bit of paint to get it on here. But I love when that happens. Like I used it all up. I didn't have any waste, even though like a couple drops of paint ain't gonna hurt anyone. But, so I painted that, cleaned off my work surface, all the things. And then splatter, of course. And again, I was like just determined. I was getting matchy, like, and I've said this a million times. We all, because I don't want to say you people, we all get so hung up sometimes on things like matching perfectly. 99% of the time, no one else is going to notice. Sometimes I like to, if I can, in cases like this, I'm gonna, I can do it. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be perfect. But I wanted to get close to the color, that copper embossing powder. Nothing I had in my stash was, that sort of color. So again, I mixed my own kind of custom splatter, and I'm using my little Fine Tech palette. I don't pull these out very often. I need to use them more because, they're not cheap, but they're beautiful. Oh, they're so pretty. So I ended up mixing 3 of the colors together to get the color I wanted. And these palettes, they're similar to the Kirtaki Gonzai Tambi and anything like this, where you need to add water and then you need to let it sit and soak in or swirl it around. Like you need to work it in to actually get the color. Like you can't just, barely touch a wet brush to it and all of a sudden you're getting color off of it. It's not like that with these because of just the nature of them, the shimmer, etc. You gotta work it. So that's what I did. And then I mixed up this, just slightly muted copper from those 3 colors, splattered it. The only thing I would do differently is I would use my fan brush, which I had sitting beside me for splatter. I was reminded of why I hate splattering with just a regular little paintbrush, which is what I used to do for years until I forget who it was that was like, oh, fan brushes work so much better. And, I jumped on that bandwagon and haven't looked back. But the reason I say that is I have splatter everywhere. I used to joke about this back in the day, but literally, like, it's on my clothes. I have copper splatter on my clothes. It's everywhere. Just when you're using a little paintbrush, fan brush for the win. Anyway, I splatter those backgrounds with my copper splatter. It's beautiful. I die cut that cardstock that I had painted with Simon's Fir Branches wafer dies. I also die cut some KRAFT cardstock, which was Neenah Desert Storm, with the FIDDLY leaf wafer die. And then my embossed backgrounds and splattered and all that, they're dry. So I trim those down to smaller than my A2 card bases. And then after I trim those down, I am wrapping some twine around these little card fronts and just taping it into place with my Spellbinder's tape. Once that's wrapped around, I just grabbed another length, doubled it up, and I'm just going to tie this in a bow. And I'm going to do that twice to both little card fronts. So got that tied, and then trim off the excess with my scissors. Once I've got that in place, I'm going to start arranging my little die cut elements. Oh, before that, I stamped the insides of the cards. So the insides of the cards are more panels of just white cardstock. And I took the big like cluster image from the Joy to You and Your set, which I kind of love this image too. I don't know. There's something about it. I just love it. So lined that up where I wanted it. And I'm stamping it with Simon's Latte ink, which is just a very nice, soft color, and it goes very well with Neenah Desert Storm. So stamp that. And then after I'd stamped both those panels with that ink, I lined up another sentiment from that same stamp set onto the center of these panels. And that I'm going to ink up with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. So same thing, got the stamp lined up, ink it up, stamp it with the Nocturne ink, put in the second panel, same thing. And then off camera, I end up trimming these down. Right now, these panels are A2 sized. I ended up trimming them down as well to like 3 3/4 by 5. So it'll be smaller than the actual card base. So now I'm going to arrange my little clusters of greenery. So I've got a couple of these fiddly leaf die cuts from the Neenah Desert Storm. And then I have the fir branches that I die cut from that KRAFT HEAVYSTOCK that I painted with my little custom green mixture. And I just kept arranging it because I wanted them to kind of peek out around my sentiment. Once I was happy with my little arrangement, I just taped these into place with some Spellbinders tape. I've shown this in other videos. A lot of times that's all I'll use because you're not going to see it. Who cares? But with these, I did add a bit of glue first and then pressed it back down with the tape just to hold because I've got like, you know, all these little fiddly bits. So once those were secured, I can then pop my sentiment on top of that, and I just use little foam squares for that. One, because it gives it dimension, but two, it also enables it to actually adhere over. There's just a ton of texture going on between the die cuts and the embossed background, etc., etc. And then I just repeated the process for the second card front. And then my card bases are going to be top folding A2 cards made from Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. And I'm going to adhere those panels that I'd stamped on the inside of each card. Hence me cutting them down. So it's just got a nice little kind of frame with the card base. And then the card front panels, you could adhere them with liquid adhesive, but I decided to use my Simon Says Stamp Big Mama foam tape because the stuff's really thin. Like this is I know I sound like a broken record, but it's true. I've never come across any foam tape that is as thin as this. It is like the thinnest you can get without it being just double-sided tape, you know? So coated the backs of those with that foam tape, pop these into place, and then of course bling. I dive through my lifetime stash of bling, which some of you were kind of shocked. I showed in my last video one of my trays of bling. You know how I'm not kidding when I say I have multiple lifetimes. Anyway, dug through my bling because I knew I had these. These are the Pretty Pink Posh metallic rose gold crystals. They're black with like this sort of rose gold, but I wouldn't even call it rose gold really. Reflect to them. They're really pretty, and they were perfect for this color combo for these cards because yeah, they catch the light and they do kind of make it look more copper when the light catches them. So I sprinkled those throughout both of these card fronts, adhered them into place, and that finished off these cards. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, I will have links below. I'll link to my blog post. In the blog post, I'll have a link to the Color Throwdown Challenge. I'll have picture links to all the supplies I used, etc. So you can check that out in the description box below if you're interested. And then also in the description box below, I will have the supply list, links to everything, links to my social media because you guys can follow me, specifically my Facebook, Instagram if you're on there, but my Facebook page is where it's at. That's where I keep all the updates and sale info and rants and random things, whatever I got going on. All the fun things. So all that is linked directly below the video. And then, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.